The next indoctrination tape I'll be debunking is called A Conversation with Asian Americans on a Race. Wow, how unique.
I think the conversations that I had about race with my family was primarily led by my dad, and it would just be in little lessons. Like, I'd pick up the phone and I'd say hello, and he goes, "I can tell you're Korean over the phone." I was like, "It's because I am Korean and I'm on the phone with you." And he goes, "No, no one should be able to tell you're Korean on the phone. People should just think you're American."
When my parents talked about Americans, they clearly meant white Americans. When they meant any other kind of Americans, they named them. They said black people or Latinos or Native American Indians was the language they would use for Native people. And so I understood early on that a real American was a white American and everybody else had to be qualified.
Okay, I hardly see this sentiment put forth. I never hear people talking about, say, black people as if they're not American, since the culture of black people in America is just about as American as what I suppose you'd call white culture. And that's why I especially take issue when black Americans identify themselves with African culture, when black and African cultures are completely different. Now, I suppose you could say that my issues with black people identifying with African cultures when they know nothing about it would actually contradict my disapproval of the idea cultural appropriation, since that's basically what that is. So, in a way, yeah, I do agree that appropriating cultures that aren't your own is an issue that's out there. But I don't think I've ever seen it focused on black people. It's clear why. Minorities are always thought to be the victims in America, which has no real evidence to back it up. But that shows why black people can never be viewed as the oppressors. Really, the only people who get shit for appropriating cultures is white folks. And I don't think white people appropriating black culture is as bad, because those are both American cultures. And I think it'd just be better if they were to merge, so as not to have such a racial divide. By the way, I realized I talk a hell of a lot about black people, even when this video isn't even supposed to have to do with black people. I'm not obsessed with black people. I don't know. They're easier to talk about than American Asians because there are more of them, and it's familiar. I guess also, what with all this Black Lives Matter shit, it's kind of put black people in the spotlight.
Well, Asian American to me is a political identification, not like Democratic or Republican, but meaning, a way to organize, a group identification that has political implications and meaning and power and strength.
Wearing this skin color is a big deal to me, which is why I don't say I'm just American anymore, because I'm not, because America doesn't see me as just American.
Look, I view you as just American. And I don't know about the alt-right or whatever, but I'd say most of the Republicans that you PC people hate so much would probably see you that way too. It's not the conservatives who see you for your race now. It's these damn regressive liberals. I wish I could ask this guy a question. Ask him, do you want to be seen for the color of your skin?
My first experience with race was when I was 6 years old. I fell in love with this girl named Janice, and I went up to her in the sandbox, and I was like, "Janice, I love you." And she was like, "You're the color of poop." And that was memory number one with racism. And I didn't know what that was. I just took that literally. I was like, "What? No. It's not rubbing off." Like, it was very terrifying.
Look, as much as I sympathize with you, this is not racism. This girl that you liked did not get some bigoted values ingrained in her at a young age. It's just that you are the color of poop, and some kid who doesn't know many Indians is gonna notice that. This story doesn't demonstrate incredible racist values that are being imprinted on our country's children. It just demonstrates that kids are stupid, and they'll say stupid shit. I understand that, I'm assuming probably being one of the only Indians where you were. It must have been very traumatizing to be told something like that for the first time. But that girl is probably not racist, and she's not to blame. Look, kids don't know what they're talking about when they say stupid shit. I remember one time when I was very little, I was calling my babysitter names, playfully, as she was doing back at me. I called her Poo-Poo Head. She called me that back, and I said that she was Poo-Poo Head because her skin was the color of poop. Now, I was not racist when I said that. I just wasn't sensitive. I had never heard of racism at that time, and the idea was foreign to me. So when I said her skin was the color of poop, it was just because of that. I was a kid and I was making fun. Kids will be stupid, and teaching them about racism may make them more sensitive, but what it really does is force them to think about skin color in that way, which in a perfect world shouldn't be needed.
These children around me already had the racial epithets to use against me. It's the first time in my life, of course, that I heard, chink and jap and gook.
When I was in second grade, I used to walk a little bit to the bus stop away from my school, and there was a boy who used to beat me up. And when he used to beat me up, he used to call me the N-word, which I didn't quite know what it meant, but I knew that it was something negative. People who evoke the most fear in me is like 10-year-old white boys. Like, I will cross the street.
Now, these are all valid problems that these people faced. Words like chink and whatever the fuck the other ones were, I don't even know. Those are racist, and it was probably the result of ignorance. I'm not going back on my sense before about how kids don't need to be taught about race. Obviously, the kids had learned those words from bigoted people like their parents, so it's not that they don't know anything about race. Then again, these were times past. Remember, it's not current day that they're talking about. I think there's a lot more tolerance now, and kids are luckily not as exposed to racism like this. I do think in those times there was probably a lot more racism towards Asians than black people, since they seemed a little more foreign, and there was a bigger racial divide.
My dad used to run a small business, and I remember people coming in who weren't Korean, and just white customers coming in, and they would just tell my dad to go back to his country. And this is before my dad had a full grasp on the English language. And I remember seeing my dad's hands like being like balled up in fists underneath the counter, but my dad just saying, "Okay, thank you, come back soon."
You know, I've always wondered why Asians do this. Like, and trigger warning, this is a generalization. You always see black people, and white people, getting really aggressive when somebody picks a fight. But like Asian store owners and shit, they'll just turn the other cheek. How the fuck do they do it? And I mean, really, that's the better thing to do. You're usually just gonna escalate shit by getting aggressive. So why not take one? And hey, I don't want to get all racial and shit, but like, Asians are kind of fucking awesome. Stereotyping here. What do they ever do? Overachieve, get good grades, and not complain about crap? Look, there's a lot of stupid shit black people and white people do. That like, we could just learn a lot here.
Well, my dad, he grew up during a very interesting time in India's sort of development and growth. So he grew up when partition happened. And during the time of partition, there was a lot of aggression. So for him to hear my stories of microaggression, he just didn't have a whole lot of room or empathy to understand what it meant. Because he's like, I'm dealing with full-on aggression. Like, I've seen full-on, like, riots and people be killed. You know, fine, kids call you Saddam Hussein. Just, like, deal with it. We have an amazing opportunity here. We have freeways, Wi-Fi, and Jamba Juice. You better go be president. No excuses.
Look, now this is a good sentiment to have. Young people today don't realize how privileged they actually are. In times past, there was so much racism and bigotry and hatred that I can guarantee you that anyone who lived through it would look at these goddamn pansy millennials and say, get the fuck over your damn microaggressions and just learn to be fucking happy with what you have. You're offended because of some phrasing I use that triggers you? Well, I think it's pretty damn offensive that you'd call something like that racism compared to all the shit minorities used to live through. It's pretty disrespectful to complain about your first world problems, basically invalidating all the work and all the actually oppressed people who have fought for so long and so hard to make this country as equal as it has ever been. No, I think I know this whole PC movement all too well. People now aren't looking for equality. They'll never be happy no matter what they have. They just want to keep asking for more, more, more. Because no matter how much our culture panders to their sensitive fucking minds, they'll still always be oppressed. Give me a list of objective goals that feminism and BLM strive for, and if you can look at it objectively and tell me that it represents racial and gender equality, and if it hasn't all been achieved already, then fine, I'll support the cause. But I'm not gonna just comply and agree with you without any justification for the conclusion that you're oppressed until you can give me a reasonable fucking end goal, at which point in your mind we will all be equal.
I had enough of stereotyping and targeting and not knowing who I was that I decided, okay, I wanted to become invisible. I didn't want any eyes on me. So I took a big step of basically taking off my turban, cutting off my hair, and that worked for a while.
That's a reasonable grievance. I can understand how a lot of people, maybe not in New York City, where I am, but in other parts of the US, where a long beard and turban may not be as tolerated. Now, there are a lot of things you could call me with the beliefs that I have, things like racist or misogynistic or homophobic or bigoted, that would all just be untrue. I will fully deny any of these claims, because I'm none of those things. However, there are a few that I might not dodge. You could call me Islamophobic, say that I don't validate or accept the religion of Islam, and you wouldn't be entirely wrong. I won't try to deny some of the disapproval I have for that religion. I think the thing you call Islamophobia is justified, since the text of that religion, the ideologies and values of that religion are hateful, bigoted, misogynistic, and racist in itself. I don't tolerate Islam. And that doesn't mean I hate Muslims, but I wouldn't validate them on their religion, because it's a hateful and backwards religion full of intolerance, whatever way you look at it. So I don't know that I'd be afraid of, or that I'd harass someone in a turban, or who just has a long beard because they're Muslim. I'd tolerate that, just as I'd tolerate anyone else who's minding their own business. But I don't validate Islam, no. You can call me Islamophobic, if you want to. I'll give you that.
But I find that the Asian American community as a whole, even the young community, they're very complacent about justice and race. And I think it's because, actually I know it's because a lot of them buy into the model minority myth. They don't really think in terms of immigration flows.
Okay, so while I was watching this, I'd never heard of this model minority myth that she's talking about. I'm not going to pretend to know a lot about it, because I don't, but I quickly looked it up just to see if this model minority thing is really a myth, because a lot of what liberals these days assume is a myth really hasn't been debunked. But I found an article on this website that's for Asians, Basically, it was just counteracting the argument I just made a little while back about how Asians are really smart and perfect and always successful and stuff. And it basically just said that they're oppressed too. And yeah, these days everybody wants to be oppressed, but it was pretty down to earth despite some of the other articles I've read. Basically, it didn't deny Asians being smarter or confirm that they are, and it didn't say that they're, like, super oppressed by the white man or anything, but it just said that it's more complicated than that, which altogether I find very agreeable.
Immigration was opened in 1965 to professional Asian families, so we were really chosen and creamed from our countries.
And that ties into the model minority myth that characterizes the Asian American community as high achieving, apolitical, and just assimilated within the broader context of quote-unquote American society. And that's a very pernicious myth.
Okay, as I've said, I'm not in complete disagreement about what they're saying, but I just have to say that I find it awfully weird that as the rest of the country is saying, hey, way to go, Asians, they're like, no, we're actually not that smart or overachieving. I mean, I feel like that's kind of throwing away a perfectly good compliment. Not that I approve of racism, even in a positive way, but you know, I gotta appreciate their modesty. This is honestly just kind of making me like Asians more.
I think it's a way to pit Asian Americans against African Americans in particular. To say, look, this racial group is doing so much better. They're able to do X, Y, and Z.
See, like Jesus, you throw them a bone and say, you're a superior race, and they deny it. These guys are awesome, you know what I'm saying? In all seriousness, though, I'd like to say that I don't think this thing that the white media does, comparing Asians to black people, is meant with any kind of hostility. If anything, ignorance. But I think it ultimately is meant to send a positive message that's anything but racist. It's assuming that the success of Asians is not in any way biological, and saying that Afro-Americans and Latinos can be just as successful if they try. I'm skeptical of the alleged lack of opportunity for minorities, but I won't deny it altogether. I just think this is meant to be a very positive message, not something like pitting Asians against blacks.
Was I ever a model minority? Of course. You know, I was a good student, and I mean, that's probably the extent of it. But, you know, I had a cousin who had a murder rap.
You know, I was the only Asian kid in Ridgewood, in a working class neighborhood. And then when I went to high school, I hung out with gangs. I got into a lot of trouble, and I barely made it into college.
Okay. I mean, it sounds like she's just talking about how she kind of sucked as an Asian, but I'll take it, sure.
This is home for me. You know, the Bronx is home for me. And I think that growing up with black, brown folks, you know, determines like our political alignment and solidarity, working on like Black Lives Matters and things like that, because we came from the same community, you know, we lived in the same ghettos, and we know what it means to be invisible and abandoned by the U.S.
When you look at more deeply within our own communities and how we play our role and how we're treated even differently within colorism and the spectrum of our skin tone, you know, Vietnamese people are treated differently and better than Cambodians, or Lao people or Hmong people, because we're lighter. And I think with our own case, we have to acknowledge that privilege of our skin color, and how we play a role being complacent and not being complacent and fighting back against what the system is between white supremacy and anti-blackness and everything in between the systems that upholds those two.
Okay, now, I like this woman's attitude in all of this, but I don't think it's necessary to assume that darker Asians are treated more poorly simply because of their skin. There's no evidence for that, so it doesn't seem like a reasonable conclusion. It doesn't seem logical either. I could understand how there would be racism against blacks or Hispanics, not because they have darker skin, but because the statistics we have, whether they're in any way biased against them or not, show higher crime rates. But just saying that people with darker skin in general are more oppressed has no basis to it. There's no logic to bring someone to that conclusion.
It's very, you know, keep your head down, eyes in your own lane, and make sure things are better for us. And I think that I saw that a lot growing up, and I've definitely thought that at some point in my life, where I would see injustices happening to other groups of people in this country, and I would tell myself, no, but you have your own things to worry about. You need to make sure that things are better for you. But then I realized when I grew up that it's not any of us that have the problem. It's the system that's the problem. And, you know, when the tide rises, all boats rise. So we need to stand by each other and we need to support one another.
I like and agree with what this woman is preaching. Though I disagree on other things, this is a good thing to end this video on. A term of mutual agreement. Races today do not need to get any more separated. Separation is the issue. The mentality of us against them. And if we do see racism, we need to stand up for the victim, whether they be Asian, Hispanic, black, or white. And I stress this because racism against whites is a real issue, just as it is against all others. Yes, be critical, but be critical of everyone equally. Don't feel the need to stand with your group. Remember that we're all people, and no matter the color of your skin, or even a little genetic differences, we're all the same at our core. By the way, guys, I'm sorry I've been doing so many damned videos on race. I'm gonna try to start doing videos on things like regressive feminism and bullshit like that, because gender is also a very big issue I want to tackle. As always, if you disagree with me, go ahead and argue. I'd like someone to oppose. If you agree and you want to see more, go ahead and subscribe, and please help me get this channel out to more people.